Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Yeah.
And I will say good morning from where I am.
Oh, yeah.
It's good noon. It's
Oh,
2 p.m. and like lunchtime. Yeah.
lunchtime there.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. It looks as though someone is having trouble connecting.
Oh, yes. And actually, we need one participant to come in, but I think she's not here right now. So maybe we will wait 1 minute, please.
1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute, and then we'll start.
We do not make the people who were here at the correct time wait.
So, Mr. Higgs, what time is it there in your place?
9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, have you had your breakfast?
No.
Oh,
Oh,
why not?
Well, I am on vacation and we must leave the place we are staying by 10 o'clock. So everything is packed. I am doing this presentation, folding up my laptop out the door, and we will get some breakfast, I think, on our drive back in. I'm in Scotland and we are going back to England. So we have a drive today. So I think we'll stop for breakfast there.
Oh.
all right. So,
I think the 1 minute is up.
Time.
yeah, it's up. So I will start by introducing Dr. Colin Higgs. So we have a very special lecturer here. He's a professor emeritus at Memorial University in Canada. And for many years, he served as a professor and dean. He also worked as an independent consultant for a wide range of clients, including national governments, international sports federations, and international organizations such as UNICEF and UNESCO. And since 1990s, he has worked in the fields of sports for development, designing, implementing, managing, and evaluating youth development programs in various countries. So as you know, he is also the author of the report titled Youth Development Through Martial Arts. And following yesterday's lecture from Dr. Su, I believe today's lecture would also enhance your understanding on designing effective youth program. So now, before I invite Dr. Collins to the floor, I want to briefly introduce you to Dr. Higgs, but I think it's better for you to introduce yourself a little bit, just
Okay.
briefly.
Okay, so me first. I will
Okay,
be
yes.
so nice to meet you. You can call me Hui. I am from China. So now I am a teacher at Huaibei Normal University in China, and it is summer vacation here. So I do not have any work to do. I just need to attend the class. So that's it. Thank you.
And I missed which university you are with.
The name of the university I am working at is Huaibei Normal University. It is located in Anhui province in China.
And Normal University, what does that mean?
That means most of our students, they will be teachers after their graduation.
Yes, no, I understand completely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And who is next?
Maybe Mrs. Shamima?
Okay.
Yes.
Glad to be here. I'm Shamima Tuli. I'm from Bangladesh. I have done my honors and masters in English literature, but I'm from my very childhood, I'm with sports, and I'm the first women black belt in Shotokan Karate in my country, and I'm running my own fitness center for last 21 years, and I train women and kids there. And I'm very excited to be here. And also, like, okay, today is our holiday. Friday is a holiday,
Okay.
and we have just finished our Eid holiday and
Yes.
religious. So we have lunch party today, and I was thinking what to do. Should I join them or should I join the class? And it was a dilemma. And actually, it's not. I was thinking because I have a chance to meet you, to have your class. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, I think. So I didn't think twice, actually.
I hope you are not disappointed. Next, please.
Next, Kate, I think we're introducing briefly to Dr. Colin Higgs. So could you please introduce yourself briefly?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Higgs. My name is Kate. I'm from Taiwan, and I'm currently working in the Taekwondo Association. So yeah, it's great to meet you, to have your class.
And you learned your English in the United States or from an American
Exactly.
speaker?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, then, thank you all for introducing yourself. I am going to share my screen. I have a presentation, but I want you to know I am not certain that the best thing would be to just go through the presentation. If you have questions, please interrupt and ask those questions, because with a small group like this, far better that I answer your questions than perhaps tell you things you already know. So I'm going to share my screen. And okay, can you see it?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, excellent. Then what I want to say is that in Europe, we have a saying called caveat emptor, and it is Latin for buyer beware of being sold something that is not correct. And so I say that to you because while I have spent a great deal of time working with youth and youth programs, I am not and would never claim to be knowledgeable about martial arts. That is your expertise. My expertise is in human development. And I'm sure you have all seen variations of this diagram. It's from the United Nations, and it is the Sustainable Development Goals. And I show this because I am very worried in sport that we claim that we can meet all of the Sustainable Development Goals using sport. And I hear this too frequently. And I would say that some of these goals we can really help deliver on, be that in sport or martial arts, or perhaps even art or music or other youth activities. So I would focus thinking on those parts of the Sustainable Development Goals where sport can make a very strong impression, where we can do the most good. And I would say that those are fairly obvious. certainly in good health and wellness, we can all make a big contribution there. We can make a contribution, and I have to move where you show up on my screen so that I can read. I think we can make a huge impact on quality education. I think we can make a huge impact on gender equity, and probably on peace, justice, and reduction of criminal activity. And those are the areas of social development that I think that sport and, particularly martial arts could make a huge contribution. You've probably seen variations, if my screen would move on. You've probably seen variations of this diagram in the report, or perhaps even Sue Weiss's presentation. But I'm going to focus on a few different parts of this. There are three things that I think absolutely are critical if sport is going to be used as a tool, an effective tool for development. They are the stages of athlete development. I may get into trouble for saying this, but I will say it anyway. Many martial arts that I have seen and worked with are not very good at presenting materials to children and youth of different ages in ways that is most appropriate for that stage of development. I see a lot of things being done for adults and exactly the same or very similar things being done for younger children. And we know that their brains are very different and that that's not a very good idea. And so I'm going to talk about what we need to be thinking about with athletes, and I'll use the word athletes, participants, whatever you want to call them, at different ages. And I'm going to look at a number of different ages that have quite specific needs that are different from other ages. And so, early childhood in my country, we would call that about 0 to 5 or 6 years of age. Middle childhood, 6 to about 8 or 9. Late childhood, perhaps 9, 10, 11, certainly just before puberty. And then adolescence, early childhood, adults, and then, welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sorry
Athletes
for the late
like me.
entry because of bad connection.
No problem. We saw you trying to connect, so we are pleased to see you here. And then you go all the way through to senior citizens such as myself, who are still trying new sports and trying to learn into later life. So that's just to say that the stages of development, there are generally 4 things that we are working on with children, youth, adults: knowledge, attitudes, skills, and behaviors. And where I would give martial arts programs that I have worked with very high marks is they are very good on skill development, and to a certain extent are quite good on behavior. But I have some problems with some of the behaviors I see in martial arts programs and classes. And one of those, I see younger athletes who are not behaving well being put on the mat with older, experienced, stronger, bigger athletes to be taught a lesson. And I think the lesson that is often learned under those circumstances is that the more powerful can impose on the weaker. And I'm not sure that that's something that is good for martial arts. It's something I want people to at least think about. And I may come back to that a little later because there's some things in there I want to talk about. What sport can build? Depending on the pedagogy, the teaching style that is being used, we know that martial arts and other sports can develop competence. Do you get better at your sport the more you practice? Yes, you do. And that makes people feel good about themselves. Does your sport build confidence? Say, yes, that's a strength of your sport. Does it develop control? Yes, I think, again, that's one of the key elements of what you teach. Coping, a little more difficult to say much about because competence, confidence, and control are inherent in your sport. They come from the very nature of your sport. Whether somebody feels that they are coping with life better is often a result of how good the connection is between that athlete in the gym and the instructor or a senior adult that they're working with. So control, their contribution to the group, the development of character, and the development of connections within the group of martial artists or between the martial artist and the instructor. Those things, those bottom four, are really related to how the sport is developed. And I feel very bad saying these things to somebody who teaches in a normal university, who probably spends all of her time working in these areas. And this is probably not new, so I apologize if that is the case. When I'm talking to broader groups, not just martial artists, I say that we have generally opportunities to work well with children and youth using popular sports. I don't think we pay enough attention to local sports, those sports that have a long history in the local area, and traditional or indigenous sports, which often have very strong appeal to some individuals within the community. To summarize this part of the diagram, I want to say that competence, confidence, control, coping, contributing to the group, building character, and building connections collectively, all together, are what we know makes for children and youth and adults who are resilient. And when I say resilient, I use that term to mean if there are setbacks in their lives, they are able to cope with them, survive them, and bounce back to being healthy, active members of society. So I think that sport can build these things. Some of them occur just by the nature of sport, and those are competence, confidence, and control, but the others require the right kind of pedagogy. So we can use sport to address a great many different issues. Some of them are quite general. We can use sport to keep kids in education. We can create employment opportunities. We can work to reduce poverty. We can help clean the environment. We can, as I've said, build resilience. But we can also use very targeted interventions to say we can use sport for a specific purpose. And the ones that I have been involved in have been in reducing drug use, reducing gang violence in Central and South America, safe sex, HIV/AIDS reduction programs, advancing the lives of people with disabilities. And at the bottom of this list, I've got marriage, which I find an interesting one, because in a number of countries that I work in, there is a very large problem of very early marriage, of marrying girls at age 10, 11, 12, 13, and associated with that, very serious health consequences of childbirth before the body is fully formed. So it says marriage here, but it's not really a marriage. It should say early marriage, working against early marriage. And we can do a lot of work in gender equity, which I'll say a bit more about. Any questions from anybody at this point? I can't believe it. Okay. Very quickly, material that you're probably very familiar with. We have got different stages of human development. Gone through them: early childhood, middle, late childhood, adolescence, etc. We're very good in our education systems in taking that into account. We don't expect a child in preschool or primary school to learn in the same way as a person in secondary school or in university. But we often expect them to learn sport the same way. And that's one of the things that I fight against constantly, is to say that sport needs to be what I would call developmentally appropriate, the right thing for the child or youth at that time in their life. And so in the sports system, and when I say we, I mean Canada. This is a Canadian system. It has been exported to a large number of countries around the world, but it is inherently Canadian. We talk about active start, getting children to be active in the first 6 years of their lives. Are we trying to produce sports people? No. We're trying to produce children with a habit of being physically active. We also want them to learn some basic human movements that they can develop later in life into sports skills. And we want them to develop something which I'll spend some time on, which is called executive function. This is part of brain development. And if we don't develop it early, it is very much harder to develop later in life, and perhaps is impossible to develop after a certain point of the child or adolescent's life. So we talk about active start, we talk about fundamentals, about the same as primary school, learning fundamental movement skills, skills that we can convert to sport skills. In late childhood, this is very much a time when human brains are ready to learn skills. And it's an exceptionally good time for highly skilled development learning. Kids will practice a particular skill endlessly at this stage of development with much less worry than before or after. By the time they're into adolescence, they're probably into very sport-specific activity. This is where they're going to the martial arts club, perhaps 2-3 times a week. They're really getting into one sport. From a development perspective, it is still too early for them to only do one sport. There are a wide range of skills that can add to that primary sport by learning and playing other sports. And so generally by adolescence, it's focus on one sport, but play complementary sports at other times of the year. Post-adolescence, you're getting into the people who are really into the sport. They're trying to reach the top. And most sports, people reach their peak performance, usually in their late 20s, perhaps into their early 30s. Some sports are later, some sports are earlier, but that's a general rule of thumb. And then into middle and old age, people like me, it's very much in the educational system, self-directed learning, and in the sports system, this is where we want people to be physically active in their sport for health, and perhaps more importantly, for being socially connected, so that we don't have older citizens who are isolated from their community. So I don't want to spend any time on those two. I want to look at the early stages of life. And I want to look at active start, which is that 0 to 6, where you may not actually have any contact with athletes of that age, but what they get elsewhere is really important to how well they do in your sports later on. So we're talking about children from about birth to about 6, and then from about 6 to about 8 for girls, up to about age 9 for boys, because even that young, girls are developing faster than boys and their brains are more advanced. These first 2 stages are not sport specific, but they're critical for later development. There's a huge amount of information. And if this is something that is of interest to you, the Harvard University Center on the Developing Child has masses and masses of really excellent information. And so it's a place to go. Excellent website, excellent information about much of what I'm talking about. So at every stage, I don't care whether this is senior citizens or young children, if they're in sport, there are 5 things that we need to work on. They're technical skills. That's your karate, your judo, your martial art, whatever it is, the actual skills of that. Tactics and strategy within your sport. Mental skills, mental toughness, anxiety reduction, those kind of things make a huge difference. Physical capacity, I don't need to tell you that. Strength, speed, stamina, these things, are the physical capacities. And for high level performance, for really being at their best, athletes also need good life skills. Having good life skills won't make you a better athlete, but having bad life skills can undo all of the training that somebody has done in their sport. So that we need to make sure that people do have these very sound life skills. And this is one of the things I really commend martial arts for, in that they spend more time working on those life skills than many other sports. So all I'm going to say is that these first 2 stages, which I think are critical and underappreciated, in the technical skills, we just want kids to develop basic human movements and fundamental movement skills. Things that, the obvious: run, jump, kick, catch, twist, balance, all of those kind of things. In terms of physical capacity, we want them not to be in the gym lifting weights. We want them to be developing it through more and more active play. In terms of life skills, we know above all else that if children do not have a good relationship with the adults in their lives and their peers, they are probably going to have trouble in life skills later in life. So for these younger ages, we really do need to build those relationships. And then tactics and mental skills, we need to really develop the building blocks very young so that they can excel later in life. And that's what I want to spend a bit of time talking about. The importance of building executive function. And there are 3 parts to executive function. That's working memory, cognitive flexibility, and impulse control. Working memory. You guys are all probably very, very good at it. The ability to hold and work with multiple bits of information at the same time. And you're doing this constantly, particularly if you're instructing, because what are you doing? You're thinking about the class, the reaction of the class, are the class getting what you're talking about? At the same time, you're thinking about the action you're taking because you want the demonstration to be good. And so you've got all of this information. You've developed it over many years. We need to give kids the opportunity. And I can find a few good examples, from any sport. And I happen to use these recently. This gentleman playing soccer, what's he got to keep in mind right now? Oh, where am I in relation to the ground? Where's the ball? Where's the net? How am I going to brace myself to land? That's a massive amount of information. And having it all stored in working memory at the same time is critical to the development of later skills. And obviously the sort of general tactics. Cognitive flexibility. I love this picture. I love it for some very bizarre reasons. If you look at the colored version, not the street signs, what do you see? You probably see, vegetables designed in the shape of a person. Everybody agree with that? If I show this to an 8-year-old, they will either the vegetables, or they will see a picture of a person. They can't see both. They cannot see both. They can't say, oh yeah, that's a picture that's made of vegetables. They go, yep, pile of vegetables, what's for lunch? Or nice picture of a person. Ability to flip backwards and forwards between those 2 ways of thinking. That's cognitive flexibility, to be able to see things in more than one way. Cognitive flexibility, often in sport, the switching between listening to your body. Is your leg in the right place? Is your arm in the right place? Do you have the arm far enough back or to the side? And what you're focusing on externally, which is, where is my opponent? What is my opponent doing? And so this ability to switch between my body feels and what I need the body to do to respond to somebody outside is a critically important part of sport in general, and martial arts, I would say, in particular. So inhibition control, my absolutely favorite photo of all time. This is the marshmallow test. And these 2 children have been given a marshmallow, which is a small confectionery, a sweet. And they have been told, if they don't eat it for 15 minutes, they can have marshmallows in 15 minutes. And clearly, these 2 are having great difficulty waiting that 15 minutes. Why is it important? This test is one of the very best ways of knowing whether a child will do well in school, will do well in their work, will do well in sport. Because it's a measure of how willing they are to put off instant gratification for future success. And this is something which is critical. If you're in a martial art, there's a lot of practice before you get good enough to be getting tremendous pleasure from your performance. And so this is a key thing we learn. Also, it has some other things related to it. Who gets the red card in a bout? The person who does something wrong or the athlete who retaliates? Overwhelmingly in sport, it's not the person who does something wrong. It's the person who retaliates who gets the red card in a race. What happens to a false start? Somebody gets thrown out. And so this ability to inhibit that I just want to do something act is critically important. And these are the things that are developed through developing executive function. Very often it's best done between about age 3 and 6. It needs fun games. And I would like you, after we've spoken today, to think about traditional games in your country, in your community, because almost all children's traditional games build up executive function. And we are losing those games, and children are not building the executive functions that will help them later on. And so, seriously think about traditional games. A lot of them are physical working memory games. I don't know what the culture is where you grew up, but where I grew up, young children, particularly young girls, play rope skipping games, where one person does a trick, they leave, the next person comes in, has to do the trick the first person did and add a trick. The third person adds a trick. The fourth person adds a trick. This is a fun game that builds working memory. Cognitive flexibility. I am asking you to actually do this test right now. Look at the card at the bottom, the yellow one at the bottom, question mark next to it. Which card at the top matches the one at the bottom? Now, I'm going to read the numbers. Who thinks that number 1 matches the card at the bottom? Who thinks number 2 matches the card at the bottom? Who thinks number 3 matches the card at the bottom? And who thinks number 4 matches the card at the bottom? You all failed. Okay. You refused to answer. Which one bet?
I think 1, 2, and 4, because 1 is because of the shape is same, 2 because of the color is same, and 4 because of the amount are same. So
exactly, which is demonstrating cognitive flexibility. You have been able to look at those things and see a range of different relationships. As you say, shape, color, number. This is what we need to be developing in young children so that they can see these kinds of relationships differently. They don't see it just the same way. Inhibition control games. very common all around the world, where there is, do you know what Simon Says is as a game? Does that mean anything to you?
Yes.
I'm sure it does in Bangladesh.
Yes, yes.
Has
very
a long British
Yeah.
colonial history.
Yes.
It's a game where a leader says, Simon Says, raise your arm. Simon Says, touch your nose. Simon Says, touch your ear, touch your eye. If they don't say Simon Says, they're not supposed to move. So you've got this person, state of wanting to respond, but conditions under which they don't respond. And so this kind of inhibition to constantly move. And when somebody doesn't say Simon Says, when they say point to your eye, shouldn't be moving because Simon didn't say it. And this is the kind of inhibition games that we're talking about. Think about your local games that have this characteristic and try to incorporate them into practices and training. Critically important for later development. Okay, child-led versus adult-led activities. Adult-led, we are doing way too much. And martial arts is often guilty of this, where everybody is doing what one adult or older athlete is demonstrating. It's very organized. All of the decisions are made by adults. There's less opportunity to develop children's executive function. If, on the other hand, activities are child-led, they are disorganized, but provide many more opportunities for developing executive function. Now, this doesn't mean that you just let kids run wild. This is supervised, giving them some guidance, but not specific instructions. Because we are doing more and more of that kind of instruction, and we are not letting kids develop the executive function that they could and should. And so I say that for you to think about. Fundamentals, we just want to develop body control, movement skills, object control skills, and you can read that, and I'm running rapidly out of time. So something I want to talk about for martial arts is that there are probably critical periods in the child's development where certain kinds of training will give you better results than doing the same training earlier in life or later in life. Very, very clear. Everything can always be developed. It can always be developed, but there are better times. I've drawn here a complicated diagram that I will spend a little bit of time going over. The red dotted line that goes across, comes up to a peak and comes down to nothing is how much a child has grown in the last year. Not how tall they are, how much they've grown. So all the way through childhood, kids grow pretty consistently year after year after year. And then if you remember to your adolescence, or you have children in that kind of age range now, they suddenly start to grow very fast. And that's the bump there in the middle. And eventually growth slows down and stops, and I'm never going to be taller than I am now. So that will come all the way down to zero. Before we go through this rapid increase in height, what I will call the adolescent growth spurt, time to develop fundamental movement skills, flexibility, and something I would imagine is important in your sport, which is hand and foot speed. I've got it listed here as speed 1, because there's 2 types of body speed, and I'll talk about speed 2 later. So before they hit their adolescent growth spurt, those 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-olds, perhaps 11-year-olds, really a time to focus on their flexibility and on their speed of hand and foot movement. So any activities that develop those should be emphasized at this stage. While they're going through their growth spurt, it is like legally being on performance enhancing drugs. All of the hormones circulating in the body make it very similar to being on performance enhancing drugs, except of course, it's perfectly legal and normal. And that's a time when both males and females should be developing stamina, endurance. That becomes easier to train then than earlier or later. And also speed 1, I said, was hand and foot speed. Obviously for striking, kicking, super important. Speed 2 is whole body movement. So start dodging from side to side. That kind of speed is best developed during the adolescent growth spurt. And then for females, for girls, once they start to slow down their growth, that's when they are most susceptible to training, building strength. And so that's when perhaps they should be more focused on strength. For boys, it's after they finish their growth spurt. And so if you understand this, and this is a very quick overview, this can permit you to give them what they will benefit from most each stage of their development. This individual, many years ago, his son every 6 months. It's a classic set of data. So this is how tall he was, from about 60 centimeters up to about 185 centimeters over 17 and a half years. And if we ask the question, how much did he grow? We get this kind of shape, which I was just talking about. So this is what the growth spurt looks like. And what we do in training should be related to where they are on this. And it's not the same for everybody. There are early developers, average developers, and there are late developers. For females, early developers may go into their adolescent growth at 8 years of age. They may start menstrual periods between 8 and 9. Some females will not go through those changes until probably age 14, 15, or 16. So there is this massive range of adolescent development, and sport absolutely needs to know about this and take it into account for reasons I will share. Who are early and late developers? I know for a fact that the female in the middle here was probably the second person in this photo to go through adolescence. The first person in this group to go through adolescence was the lady on the left. And the last to go through adolescence was almost certainly one of the 2 women on the right-hand side of the screen. Whether you are an early developer, average developer or a late developer depends to a very large extent on your body shape. And that is not taken into consideration enough. 3 body types. I'm sure you've seen some of these before. If I'm repeating, I apologize. Endomorphs, they're the kind of chunky, wider, heavier individuals. Mesomorphs are the muscular ones, and ectomorphs are the narrow ones. I don't say tall. They might be short and narrow, or they could be tall and narrow. It's the narrowness of their body that's important. They each go through adolescence at different times. Mesomorphs on the top of this chart, they go through adolescence first. Now, if you're muscular and you are growing very rapidly because you've reached your adolescent growth spurt, do you think that makes people good or bad at sport? Geez, I'm a 14-year-old. I'm 2 meters tall. I have to shave twice a day. And I'm competing as a 14-year-old against somebody who hasn't even started adolescent growth. It's a no contest. And there are consequences of it that I want to share, just to show you that there are relationships between these body shapes and success in different sports. No surprise, distance runners are those very narrow, lean individuals. Sumo wrestlers, martial arts are certainly muscular, but they're also rather large muscular. And weightlifters tend to be those very muscular ones. So early developers are the mesomorphs. Average developers are typically endomorphs, and late developers are these tall, skinny individuals. The best athletes, if you looked at the previous diagram, kind of came from the area around where I'm moving my cursor now. So what does that mean? It means that they're generally, the best athletes are late developers. So here's the problem for males. We've got 2 children here going through adolescence. In the fundamental stage, they're about the same size. Learn to train, this is the pre-adolescence. They've both grown a bit and they're about the same. By the time they get into their early teens, what's happened to the early developer? He's shot up, big, strong. Late developer, he's still in his childhood stage. One of these is likely to have more success than the other, and that's the early developer. So what does the late developer do? Drops out. Very, very frequently drops out because he's having no success in the sport. And then the late developers eventually do go through adolescence. They go through their growth spurt and they end up taller with a better athletic shape than the early developer. Now, this early developer has been successful for the last 2 or 3 years, and now people start to beat him. What does he do? No longer winning, he drops out. So we've got this system where the late developer drops out of sport early. The early developer drops out of sport. And we have lost a huge amount of talent. It's actually different for females. For females, we've got the same thing through childhood. But the early developer, females, 2 characteristics of that early developer are wider hips and breast development, neither of which are particularly good for athletic performance. And so the child, the late developer who hasn't developed wider hips and breasts, has an athletic advantage. And so in females, it's often the early developer who drops out. And so it's the opposite way round for girls, but the problem's the same. How do we keep late developing males and early developing females in sport during this adolescent growth period? That's a problem that sports need to solve. And so, I'm sure many of your sports have age group competitions, under 12, under 14, under 16. You are not rewarding the best athletes. You are rewarding the early developers. And so kids who are early developers win everything because really they're adults. And the late developers win nothing because they're still children. And so this is a core problem that sports have got to overcome if they're to give maximum benefit to every participant. The problem is much more severe in males than in females. So I say that it's not that big a problem. But these three boys on the right here are all in an under 14 competition. So kid in the middle is probably your average 14-year-old. This kid is a super late developer on the left, and the gentleman on the right is, a fully fledged adult. In gymnastics, it's probably not that important. But what about in, shot put? Some kind of activity that needed strength. It's just a no contest. So, got to keep them in the game. Also can't continue without saying that we have serious issues within sport, and your country and your sport has these problems, whether you admit it or not. We have overuse injury of adolescents because the muscles grow faster than the strength of the bones. And so that's a problem. We have psychological injury and we have sexual abuse and exploitation. And I constantly hear that it's not a problem in, quote, my country or my sport. Every single investigation has shown it in every single environment in which sport occurs. Overuse injuries, particularly of the bones. I love this coach. Yeah. This coach is giving instructions to an athlete. What do you think the athlete is thinking right now? I wish he would stop. Getting any sport advice that he'll ever listen to? No. What's he likely to do next practice? Stay home. Sexual exploitation. There is widespread, and I don't want to say it's widespread, but there are instances of it across the board. Doesn't matter about the sport. And you need to understand who is most at risk. There is a pattern. The person who is most at risk is a single child, no brothers and sisters to confide in, a parent who is not involved with the child's sport. That's the one who just drops the child at the martial arts club and you never see them. The kid turns up, the parent is not involved. and perhaps most difficult about is that it is athletes who are becoming very good who are often most at risk. And they're at risk because the coach has tremendous power to either advance that individual's athletic career, to recommend them to go to a training camp, to recommend them to be on a regional or national team. And it is at that point where the coach has this ability to, well, if you want to be recommended for the national team, this is what you need to do for me. And so again, I know that 99 out of every 100 coaches is going to be very ethical, will do what they want for the child, will be good people. But in every sport, there will be the one who is not there for the right reasons. And other coaches and other people in the sport need to be looking out for the children who are at risk and saying something. Because whenever we have these problems, people say, yes, I thought that was, I wasn't really comfortable with his behavior. They kind of knew, but didn't do anything about it. So I ask you to think about that. So I want to talk a little bit. Oh, that came up, so I'll go straight to it. To talk about equality versus equity. The reality in life is that some people are tremendously privileged. I would count myself amongst those, that I don't have any issues getting to see this game. There are some kids who can see it, and some kids who are just so badly disadvantaged that they have no chance of seeing this game. Equality, which we often hear we need to strive for in sport, isn't enough. Because when we treat these three kids equally, then the early developer, maybe the one on the left, the average developer is the one in the middle, and this kid at the bottom, we've treated him equally with everybody else, and he's still no better off. Where we need striving for is to give everybody the same opportunity to be involved. And that means that some kids will need more help than others. And so I urge you to think about what equity in martial arts would look like. What does that disadvantaged kid need extra so that they can take part in sport, not to just say, well, has the same opportunity by treating everybody equally. And I think I have used my time. And so I want to finish with this, which is equity and equality is working in a safe and welcoming environment. There's a continuum, and you need to think where you are on that continuum. Are you excluding people, which is the worst possible scenario? Are there people you won't take into your club? What would happen if somebody in a wheelchair turned up? Would you turn them away, or would you let them stay and learn your sport? The next is to make people feel safe and included. Third stage is to feel safe that they can learn in this environment. We're getting very good to equality and equity when people feel safe and feel that they can contribute to what's going on in the club. But if we really want to help individuals develop as humans so that they can meet some of those sustainable development goals, not only do they have to feel safe to be in the club, in the dojo, in the team, they need to feel safe that they can challenge the leader, and that challenge will be respected, it will be listened to, and not to be stamped out because I'm the boss and this is the way we do things in my dojo, in my club, in my team. So from that point of view, I've pretty much used my time, and I would answer questions, or I would be happy to reconvene at a later time to answer questions. But thank you for listening. And if you got some questions, I'm happy to answer them.
You're in a hurry,
Going.
so
Yeah.
yes, yeah. As you are in a hurry, so from me, I don't want to ask you any question, waste your time now. But it would be lovely if you give us your mail address, and so that if we have anything to ask you, then we can contact you.
You can certainly contact me through Miss Hong,
Oh, okay.
Okay,
who
you.
knows where I can be found. But I'm going to say, please, not before 20th of July, because that is when I finish my vacation and I will be back at work.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everybody. It has been lovely to meet you, and I will be happy to have a one-on-one Zoom call or to chat to you if you have further questions. So have a good lunch, evening, or in this case, morning, and hopefully we will speak again in the future.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Higgs.
You're very welcome.
Have a great breakfast.
I am going to. Thank you. Okay. Goodbye.
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 Bye.